Welcome back to Gillette Stadium, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist for WEEI.com, Christopher Price. Chris, it's the 4-8 Cleveland Browns, bottom of the AFC Northern Division, against the 9-3 New England Patriots, who, with a win and the things break right, not only could they clinch a playoff berth, they could possibly clinch the AFC East. Just depends on how things work out. What could go wrong this weekend?
It's a hat and a t-shirt game. How can you not love a hat and a t-shirt game, as Teddy Bruschi used to call them, right? No, I think when you look at both sides of the ball, I think Cleveland has really some decent elements there, and maybe even better than decent elements when you look at guys like Josh Gordon, one of the best young receivers in the league. But barring some sort of total breakdown across the board by New England, whether it's on special teams, offense, defense, whatever, I don't think that they have enough offensive options. I don't think they have enough defensive capability to come in here and beat the New England Patriots.
Now, you mentioned Josh Gordon. He is an NFL record setter. He has become the first NFL receiver in history, Chris, to record over 200 yards receiving in back-to-back games. He has something like 635 yards, I believe it is, in his last 3 games. That's never been done. That's an NFL record. He is the kind of receiver that could give the Patriots fits. Do you see them making any type of adjustments with Aqib Talib and maybe going from a single safety high, which they've been using a lot, to maybe a two safety coverage?
I think you're looking at a single safety high situation with Talib really providing most of the work. I'm not saying it's going to be exclusive man coverage, but I think when you look at Talib's work against some of the other longer, more elite receivers in the league this year, I think that's certainly a matchup the Patriots feel pretty good about, depending on Talib's health, his hip situation. He remains questionable over the course of the year. He's remained questionable over the course of this week. But I think they feel pretty good about where he is physically going into this one. Look, it begins and ends with Josh Gordon on the offensive side of the ball. We don't know as we sit here on Thursday morning who's going to play quarterback for them. There's a handful of different possibilities. Who can get the ball to him? I just imagine what Gordon's ability would be like if he had some stability at the quarterback position. But other than that, they're getting good production out of their tight ends. There's no running game to speak of. They can't run the ball consistently, and I just think that's a formula for failure when you're coming in here to play a team like the Patriots.
And if you ask me, I think Jason Campbell gives them the best chance to compete in this game against the Patriots on Sunday afternoon. Obviously, there's Brandon Weed, and we're still waiting for his breakout year. I mean, he came in, went to college very late, I believe it was, at Florida State, and then, made his NFL debut, but he still hasn't been the quarterback a lot of people thought. There's Alex Tanney, the trick shot quarterback.
Trick shot Tanney, exactly. And then there's Caleb Haney. So you see a situation like that, and if you're a Patriots fan, you should feel thankful for what you have, because again, There's some elements there on the offensive side of the ball that could make them competitive. And we saw earlier in the year when Brian Hoyer was at quarterback, they looked like things were coming together very nicely for them on the offensive side of the ball. Hoyer goes down. They've had the problems with Campbell, Whedon. They're just going through quarterbacks at a record clip out there, and you contrast that with what's going in here in New England, and particularly Brady's performance over the last 4 or 5 weeks. It just strikes. It's a real contrast between situations.
Now let's turn to the Patriots side of the ball. A lot of the talk this week when Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were asked about the possibility of clinching a playoff berth was all about the Cleveland Browns. You would expect nothing less from the Patriots, all business. They have got to get off to better starts. No question about it. It's like the season has flipped. Early on this year, we were talking about how they couldn't score in the third quarter. Now they're making all of the adjustments. Antonio Smith would say too many adjustments for his liking after what happened with the Houston Texans last weekend. But Patriots need to get off to a good start this week offensively against a defense in the Cleveland Browns that is ranked 5th overall in the NFL. A fact that people may overlook when they look at Joe Hayden in that secondary in this Cleveland defense.
You know what's really interesting, though, when you look at the splits for this Cleveland team, they are very good when it comes to total yardage allowed, but at the same time, they're 19th in the league in terms of points given up. Now, to me, that suggests they're not playing very good complementary football. Their offense is not putting them in really good situations.
And they're turning the ball over.
Exactly, and we saw some of that last week with Houston. I think Houston is a very similar team in that regard. So they're playing well defensively, and they're competitive defensively, but they're just not getting a lot of help from the offensive side of the ball. They're getting put in some bad situations. I think this week is going to be the same kind of thing. I think when you look at the performance of Brady, when you look at the performance of Gronkowski, when you look at the performance of guys like Vereen and Edelman and Amendola, they're getting production out of all of their skill position players, and I think that continues this week here in New England.
Another theme, Chris, this week is, has Rob Gronkowski started to really hit his stride?
I do. I agree with you. I think that we saw some of that the week before against Denver, but we're seeing it more and more as the weeks continue. We're looking at a guy who is getting somewhere back to, close to the guy he was at the midway point of last year before he had the arm injury. So you get Gronkowski going. He demands attention. He takes an extra defender away, so that opens things up for guys like Edelman and Amendola, particularly when he runs that seam route and takes the safety with him. There are opportunities underneath more and more for those receivers. We saw it in the Houston game. Shane Vereen was a guy who really benefited from that in the passing game, so it's going to be interesting to see going forward the impact he has, not only in the Patriots passing game, but the opposing pass defenses as well.
With road tests at Miami and then at Baltimore, normally I would say this would be a trap game. But after what happened in Houston last weekend, I don't see that as a possibility this weekend. Do you?
I agree with you. I will say this, though, to your point before, they need to get off to a better start because that's not sustainable down the road. You can get away with it against a subpar team. You can get away with it against the Houston. You might even be able to get away with it this week against the Cleveland, but that's not sustainable down the road and into the postseason. You need to be able to play a good 60 minutes. I don't think we've seen this Patriots offense play a full 60 minutes to this point in the season. And I think when we do, I think it's going to be an impressive thing to watch. I think they need to get it started this week against the Browns.
And we keep coming back to this, but it is not really the playoff picture in the AFC East that I think the Patriots are really keeping their eye on. It's the playoff picture in the entire AFC. There's the Denver Broncos who had a huge win in Kansas City last weekend, a win that a lot of people didn't think they would get necessarily the way they played in New England the week before. Then they are certainly the number one seed as we sit right now. But the Patriots are a game ahead of the Cincinnati Bengals and the Indianapolis Colts. If somehow the Patriots were to trip up and the Bengals run the table, the Bengals get the number 2 seed, and I'm sure everybody inside that locker room is aware of that.
The Bengals really, and we talked about this before, I think the Bengals are really the wild card. When you're talking about the AFC elite right now, and we've talked about this on several occasions,
right.
I think a lot of it goes to a lot of it's going to be put on the shoulders of Andy Dalton. I think that Cincinnati defense and the skill position players are some of the best in the league, but is the quarterback ready to take that next leap forward? I think if you're a Patriots fan this week, you're rooting for the Colts because
no question.
They would have the tiebreaker if you're looking at two teams who are tied for that number 2 spot.
Right.
But the Bengals are one of those teams that really can't be discounted. They have an impressive resume. Hey, the Patriots, they knocked off the Patriots earlier in the season. Granted, that was a New England team that was still kind of a work in progress to this point, but that was a very impressive win. Like you said before, a very impressive defense, a lot of really good skill position players. It's going to be interesting to watch their development the rest of the season.
I assume you feel the Patriots get the job done Sunday.
Yeah, I do. This to me strikes me as probably somewhere in the range of like a 35-14 game.
Right.
I don't think that Cleveland has the firepower on either side of the ball to compete with New England. Again, I like Gordon. I like that defense. It's a good young defense, but again, they're just being put in too many bad situations by their offense. I think New England, for the first time since, I don't know when, maybe since the Pittsburgh game, is going to have a relatively easy victory.
All right, Chris, the Patriots this weekend with a win will have 10 wins again, something they have done every single season since 2002. It's an NFL record that Bill Belichick has set, and I don't think anybody's going to touch it. We'll wait and see if the Patriots can ring up win number 10 this Sunday against the Cleveland Browns. He's Christopher Price. I'm Mike Petraglia at Gillette Stadium, WEEI.com.